get started.
Yep.
All right, you ready? So we're gonna call this meeting to order. Purpose of our meeting is to get an update on P&Z from Monica Miller. And you have names of everybody present in the room, so we're good to go. So Monica, turn it over to you.
Okay, so I'll just give you a little bit of background on me and how long I've been in the department really quickly. And then my strategy here was just kind of, it was a little bit of like a stream of consciousness as far as all the things that we do. So I'll maybe won't spend a ton of time explaining every little detail, but certainly if there's something on the list that you want me to stop and kind of talk about, please do that. Otherwise, we'll kind of just breeze over a lot of it and then focus on kind of like the bigger, kind of more important kind of pressing things that we have right now. So I started in the department about actually almost exactly 5 years ago and have learned everything I know about planning and zoning from working here. The first couple of years that I was on board, I was more so like an administrative assistant. So I think my responsibilities were geared more towards answering phone, filing, answering questions, customer service, stuff like that. But kind of grew into taking more active role in the actual planning side of things and application processing and just understanding our code a lot better. And as you're probably aware with department changes that happened approximately a year ago, I really had to like kind of step up and take on like a huge role in that. I don't have the title of planner, however, I'm planning tech, and for several months was the planning department just on my own, and then we had an employee come in, and she has since, as you probably know, transferred over to Public Works. So I'm again in the planning department by myself. So that's just kind of a little history there. And I've just made a list of things. It's really not that intricate of a list until you start talking about it. So just starting with day-to-day operations, list here is going to be standard for pretty much any department, which is going to be coding bills, filing, creating and maintaining digital records as well as paper records, public communications, of course, understanding our GIS maps, which the assessors use as well. So that's kind of helping the public understand how they can access information themselves as far as property ownership goes, things like that. Address verification and assignment, so we assign addresses to everybody in the county. We typically leave the cities, addressing the incorporated cities, up to them unless they ask for assistance. And then coordinating with other departments just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and we just kind of have like an open communication with anybody that wants to know. It just, things work better that way. For sure, if there's anything that maybe like I'll be kind of explaining things from my own brain, but just stop me if anything's not making sense or if I'm speaking too quickly or going too quickly. So the next thing that goes with our daily operations is going to be building permits. So the details of building permits are basically providing people with applications, helping them through that application process, which is everything from filling out the application itself to explaining timelines to explaining basically everything that goes into that. A lot of what we do with building permits is actually pretty frustrating. It's a lot of data entry. So to really break it down for you, we take in an application, we look at that application and fill in our part, which is going to be determining zoning, minimum lot size, making sure it complies with our zoning code ordinance, or zoning code, and then we send that out for agency review. So those agencies are going to include, just depending on the location of the property, can range from Panhandle Health District for septic, Panhandle Health District institutional controls program for the Bunker Hill Overlay District, might be the sewer district. So what we do is we take that application out, send it to other agencies. So if they have any requirements or anything that they need to chime in on, we allow them to do that. So we kind of work with other, it's like an interagency kind of agreement that while we may not be able to withhold a building permit based off of other agencies' requirements, we still want to know what they say and make sure that we're making the permit compliant with everyone. So we go into agency review. We also help people understand not so much building code, because we do subcontract, or we contract out to City of Kellogg for building inspections. So that's, while we process the permits and we do a lot of the legwork and we do a lot of the communications with the applicant, the actual inspection of the building is done by Keith Teeters, who is our building official. And I can get you details on any of this. I I know it'll just come in time. I didn't wanna overwhelm you though, so I'm just, again, touching on like the broader points, and we'll get you anything that you need as far as, kind of understanding that relationship or anything like that. So, basically, we pay the city of Kellogg to, basically pay Keith Teeters to be our building official. He's the building official for all the other cities, incorporated cities, outside of Mullen. So it's a pretty common thing for him to be contracted, with government agencies. So, just made a note here that we typically, City of Kellogg will send us an invoice, we'll pay that invoice so that Keith can get paid for, both the plan review fee, so part of the agency review process is gonna be building plan review and so forth. Side note would be, a lot of people have this question on a daily basis, so electrical, plumbing, HVAC, those types of permits are all issued by the state, so we don't get involved in any of that. Okay. Getting into more, the zoning side of things, so zoning permits, so these are all things that our office handles directly. I do have a section, I think on the next page, that kind of covers where HMH steps in as our consultants, but, more or less anything that we're gonna cover here in the next couple minutes is gonna be directly related to our office. So one of the big ones, especially of late, is site disturbance. You know, to put it very simply, and maybe obviously, there's no flat ground to build on anymore. So we're seeing just huge increase in development on hillsides and really sensitive areas. And so site disturbance has become like a hot button issue, I would say, within the past year or two. So with site disturbance, as far as your operations go, same thing as building permits. We're gonna provide applications. We're gonna review those applications and just assess based off of our ordinance what is needed. Typically that's broken down into two categories, which is gonna be like, do you need a professional engineer to draw up a plan or do you not? And that's all in our ordinance, so we refer back to the code for all of that. Usually with site disturbance, especially if it's gonna be a steep hillside that falls in that category of, hey, we need to determine how steep the slope is, we're gonna perform some site visits. Again, just reviewing code and going back to the book and saying, hey, what does the book say for this, and trying to relate that back. I put a note on here that, if anything, and this goes for pretty much anything on this list, and very specifically floodplain, but if there's anything outside the scope of what, and I mean, just because it is just me in the department right now, if there's anything that I don't know or I don't fully understand or need a second opinion on, we send it to HMH for their professional review. However, we do try to avoid that because it is costly and typically the applicants are responsible for that cost. So we just monitor that very closely. Institutional controls program, we work very closely with them, especially in the Bunker Hill, well, only in the Bunker Hill Superfund site. So these site disturbance permits will go to them, as well as really any permit that we get. And then just the last note on there, I already touched on the hillside development. The next big thing that we deal with is floodplain. And so part of our contract with HMH is that they handle our floodplain permitting for us. And so what that looks like is we take in an application for floodplain, so our office receives that application. We fill in all the basic information, which is gonna be, the applicants will fill out a lot of the address, phone number, things like that. But we'll take a look at parcel numbers, see if there's anything else that we need to apply. We'll provide some basic answers. I have a working knowledge of floodplain, so I can answer a lot of the day-to-day questions. However, again, because the county has to have a designated floodplain manager, that was not included in the scope of my responsibilities when the department changed. So that's why we ended up with HMH as our floodplain managers. The gentleman, or our main point of contact, really, his name is Justin Shaw. And I can get you all his details, but pretty much there's a group of folks at HMH that we, who could review the application potentially, but Justin is, I believe, our floodplain manager. So we've taken our applications, we mark them up, and then we send those to HMH for review, and then go from there. So a lot of times it's pretty straightforward. If we need additional documentation, for example, sometimes with a floodplain development permit, we need what's called an elevation certificate. I don't know if either of you have ever built in the floodplain, but I think, well, you're not in the,
but
you're like
keeps
way
me
up.
out of it.
So this might not apply to you, but hypothetically speaking, let's just say you were in floodplain, we might need an elevation certificate from an engineer that would be provided by the applicant or property owner that would tell us essentially what that base flood elevation would be. We would have HMH review that data, review that elevation certificate so that we're compliant with FEMA. That's really what we're doing there. So with that, we set some building requirements. Again, if there's anything that our office can handle or questions that we can answer, we do that. But because of the way that that FEMA wants us to do, the floodplain manager does have to review and sign off on permits. So that's HMH's role in floodplain. I did want to note on here, this is a little bit broader issue, but you'll probably hear about it. The city of Kellogg for a number of years has been working on revising the floodplain maps. They've been working with FEMA. And it's a very, very long, painstaking process, and I speak from a point of, currently I sit on Kellogg City Council, so we get regular updates every month, and it's just basically not moving. It's just the way it is, but it's important to note because a lot of the county and even city of Pinehurst is working on a similar process. So I think there's like a group of people like throughout the county that meet on that. I don't have all the details, but I can find out for you. I don't know if that's something that, I think possibly like when Mike Fitzgerald was on the commission, I believe he was part of that, and still maybe is in a different role. So I just wanted to note that on here, that if you start getting emails about that, or if you've heard about that, that would be something that we would want to get on board with, because I'll say, albeit I'm not a floodplain expert, but I disagree with the maps. Not being an engineer or scientist or anything, I disagree with the floodplain maps, and I think a lot of people feel that way.
A lot of people.
Absolutely, yeah, and even I would even say, yes, I think a lot of professional people disagree with the mapping. So that's what City of Kellogg is working on. Hopefully that will grow into the rest of the county. I have heard that City of Pinehurst is working on something similar, but Kellogg has been in the end zone for a couple of years now, and we just keep getting stalled out. So wanted to bring that up. That is a very quick overview of floodplain. Next, we'll get into land use, which are all going to be public hearings. So just to kind of go back over, building permit, site disturbance, floodplain, all of those things are just done through the office. Is kind of like that's done in the planning office here at Shoshone County. Land use applications, so that means that administratively we just issue a building permit. After we do agency review, planning tech, whoever could issue a building permit. Land use applications are all going to be public hearings, and that's sort of where, as a governing board, you all could potentially be involved. Same with Planning and Zoning Commission. So here, I hope I'm not forgetting anything, but as far as land use goes, conditional use permits, those are typically just brought before the P&Z Commission. Now, of course, if anybody appeals any of this or wants to bring it before the Board of Commissioners, I don't know all the details of that, but that definitely would involve the BOCC, but for the most part, it's just going to be Planning and Zoning Commission, where when you guys were kind of doing your tour around the building, I touched on very, very briefly that they meet across the street. I'll get you their schedule, and then I realized it sounded like you had you had other obligations or something. They're meeting in February, so but the first chance you get, if you could just, they would, they really appreciate when commissioners take a chance to come and see what they do. So I'll touch base with you on that. So conditional use permits, an example would be the way that we've approached these and have approached them historically and continue to do so is if a use is not outright permitted or prohibited in a zone, potentially someone could apply for a conditional use permit. Okay, so one of the big ones that I have no doubt that you've heard about would be, for example, like campgrounds, right? So we don't have, other than a commercial zone, you really don't have outright zoning for campgrounds. So what this does, it allows a landowner to come in, list exactly what they'd like to do, propose exactly what they would like to do, and then we would do a public hearing on that where there would be public noticing, we would advertise, we would take it before the Planning and Zoning Commission, who then would either approve with conditions, add conditions, deny, however, so on and so forth. I think that's about it. Again, unless that got appealed, once something gets appealed, it typically just goes up to like the next higher governing board. So unless something got appealed, P&Z Commission would just be making the decision on that. Special use permits are We rarely do these. The only example that I have in my experience here would be the jet boat races on the St. Joe. So the St. Joe River hosts jet boat races, what, every 2 years or something? Is it every year?
I thought it was every year.
Anyways, you don't need to get into the details, but typically special use differs from a conditional use in that it is gonna be a one-time or less infrequent thing. The conditional use applies more towards a permanent, typically commercial activity that's gonna stick with the land. If that land transfers hands, that conditional use permit is still gonna be good for whatever that exact use is. So to back up just a tiny bit, anytime we expand or change any of these, typically if we're doing something less impactful, so say, say I wanted to open, I don't know, like a cabin resort, and I want to be approved for 10 cabins and got approved for that. If they ended up only doing 6, or if they're like, I'm gonna remove 4 of the cabins, that wouldn't necessarily come before the board. However, if we're increasing the impact, that's gonna come back to whoever for review. So same thing with the special use permit, that's kind of more of like a one-time thing, or an infrequent thing like the jet boat races where, I think they're on a 2-year rotation where every 2 years they have to reapply. Nothing ever changes, but they did want to, I think the past couple of years, extend the race course. That was broadening it. So we went to hearing for that and then ended up, I believe the outcome was that they could not expand. However, they could continue to do what they were doing before. So that's the best example I have for special use. Subdivisions are fun. They
Just to summarize.
Oh man, yeah, if I had to use one word to describe subdivisions lately, it is fun. So subdivisions are probably the most time-consuming thing that our office deals with, and that is because there are a million questions, and that is because, in truth, our code, while there are some benefits to it, it is open to interpretation. So we have a lot of people saying, hey, I'm reading this, do I need to do this? Well, it can be interpreted a couple different ways. So subdivisions, you're looking at pre-planning, code interpretation. We do the agency review that we do similarly for building permits. However, there's more that goes into it because you're talking about more development. Majority of the time when we do subdivisions, it's, people hear that word and they think of something like wrath drum. It's typically, you're gonna see subdivisions, which, keep in mind, the very basic definition is a subdivision is anytime we create a new lot or parcel. So even if you do a split with 2 lots, you're looking at a subdivision, which means it's a public hearing process. And people really don't care for that. But when we do subdivisions, it's typically between 2 and 5 lots. It's very rare that we see these giant operations of like multiple lots. I think the most we've done in the past couple of years is maybe even 8 or 9 lots. And I don't mean to minimize that. However, it's not like these giant, and those are like bigger ones with larger lot sizes. So with that, everything's gonna go through the same process, but you get into, and I don't wanna bore everybody with this, there's minor subdivision, division versus major subdivision. Either way, we're gonna take both of them through a similar process. The difference is when it comes down to approval and the governing board reviewing of it, there's major subdivisions get a little bit more scrutiny than minor. So kind of going back to the list, we also do noticing for this. So there's adjacent property owner noticing, there's noticing that's published in the newspaper because we're still old school. We put it online, of course. P&Z commission meetings also get posted on our website for when we have those. In addition to posting on site, we go through the platting process, which is making sure that everything we need is on the actual plat itself, the record of survey. It's talking with the surveyors to understand what needs to be on that. It's a lot. Conditions of approval, if we have to add those in. The nice thing is, so we get through most of what we need to get through, and then Stratton Land Surveying, or Rob Stratton, has been the county surveyor for a number of years. So HMH is more so to kind of consult on certain matters in planning and zoning, where Rob Stratton is going to review all of our plats. Additionally, he is working on, I think, doing some surveying up in Canyon Edition. I think that's something that the board had tasked him with last year. I don't have all the details to that because it was kind of outside P&Z's realm. It was more so like a BOCC thing. So Stratton is going to review our plats. And then HMH is going to handle more kind of if we get stuck somewhere and need some help. those kind of things. So with that, the last couple of things here would be just a breakdown of major subdivisions. And you do not need to remember this, and I'll tell you it a million times, I have no problem, that's what we do. Major subdivision applies when you're looking at either, to put it very simply, it's written a little bit differently in code and it's very convoluted, but it's either the lots are less than 2 acres in size, and this is based off of zoning and a number of other things. So if any of the lots are gonna be less than 2 acres, or they're going to be more than 9 lots, it's going to be considered a major subdivision. And that means that more infrastructure is required. When we look through the code, there are other boxes that they need to check. As far as review process goes, noticing is gonna be done. That major subdivision is gonna go first to Planning and Zoning Commission, who will make a recommendation, and they'll either recommend to either approve or deny, or continue for further reviews, similar things. If they make a recommendation, I mean, they will no matter what, it's gonna come to the Board of County Commissioners regardless. So you can either uphold that decision, or my understanding, right, and this is just me speaking in terms of planning and zoning and what I've seen, you can either uphold that decision or you can deny it. And then we're looking at, this is still something I'm trying to understand, because historically, we haven't, I don't know, necessarily stuck to the code as well as we should have in terms of when we combine what's called preliminary approval versus final approval. But it's my understanding that once you get the recommendation, if the board approves the recommendation, you get preliminary approval, where then the applicant is expected to go kind of install that infrastructure. They're supposed to take some steps, whatever conditions you may have for final, and then come back in. Historically, we've combined final and preliminary. And there is something, I'll tell you, it's gonna sound like a broken record, and I'm fine with it. We're gonna go back to the book every time, we're gonna go back to code every time and see why we've been doing that, or how we should be doing it. And so it's my understanding that if it meets certain standards, for example, if it's 4 lots or fewer, we can do preliminary and final at the same time. But if it's more than 4 lots, it should be going preliminary and then final. So we can get into all of that later. It's just kind of going back and looking at how we could be doing better and sticking to our own rules a little bit more thoroughly. So after explaining all of that, we do have exemptions to our subdivision process, and there's a list of them in code, but the main one is boundary line adjustments. And so boundary line adjustments are an admin thing that we do in the office, which is, say that, for example, I want to convey 100 feet of my property to Jasmine. We can do that without subdividing because we're not creating any new parcels. And so we would do that through recording of legal descriptions and working with the assessor's office on that. We used to have an exemption, and this is something that might come to your attention in the next couple months. We used to have an exemption that would allow for the creation of lots if they were 10 acres or greater. And so we would just need new legal descriptions for each of those 10 lots. The thing is, though, they could do that up to 9 lots, which is arguably a subdivision, but they're not having to go through agency review. We're not having to notice anybody for these exemptions. And so we did away with that. We went through the steps with legal and did away with that rule, because essentially it was going against our ordinance. It was allowing people to create subdivisions without going through the process. Exactly. So there have been a handful of people who are upset about that, because I don't know how long it was like that, and every county has, they call it, like sometimes they'll call it a free split. So they'll say, hey, it's a free split, or you can do a number of free splits. Even Kootenai County has it. And I believe there are some stipulations in Idaho code. However, if the county's gonna be stricter about it, you have to stick with the stricter rules. So I think ours is just, we did away with that, and now there's, in terms of avoiding subdividing, really boundary line adjustment is kind of the only way. But you have to get everybody on board for that. It's a little less impactful. So, moving on. Zone changes. Those are similar hearing process to subdivisions. Are gonna go through P&Z Commission first. Excuse me, and the Board of County Commissioners. I just made some notes here. So the review process, that's basically it. It's very similar to subdivisions. We do have 2 zone changes that we've done the past couple of years that I believe have not been adopted through, I think it's through ordinance. We at first thought it was resolution, but it ended up being ordinance. So I'm trying to get an answer from the prosecutor's office. I might work with Jasmine a little bit on that. It was something to where we have approval, it was completely approved by the Board of County Commissioners. I don't know if it ever made it on the consent agenda.
To be adopted.
Yet, exactly, to be adopted. So while we recognize the zone changes for both of you, the map has not been updated, and that's frustrating. And so I don't know if there's any reason to take it through public hearing again. That's a little bit outside my wheelhouse. However, we did get approvals and we did get orders of decision for both of those zone changes. They were just like, they're right there. We just need to figure out like where we go from there. And that would be helpful in the future so that we can get that done in a timely manner, because it has not been done in a timely manner in the past. Right-of-way vacations. Another super fun land use process. So right-of-way vacations, this is where, you know, I'd really like to get on board with Jasmine and you all in our offices and get on the same page, because at one point, these right-of-way vacations were being initiated through the Commissioner's office, and I think dealt with primarily through the Commissioner's office. However, I would say in the past 2 to 3 years, planning and zoning has gotten more involved, and like arguably it is a land use matter, but it was sort of confusing to where the Commissioner's office was doing part of the process and then we were doing part of the process down. It was very confusing, and it gets tricky with the public comments, because technically, you know, we don't really want the governing board to see those public comments until they have an application in front of them. So that's why P&Z was kind of taking in those comments just to kind of filter them through, but they were still coming into the Commissioner's office. So I think that needs to be, the process of right-of-way vacations needs to be refined a little bit. Where our office can help is just kind of, I think where we left it is, you know, we needed to kind of team up with the BOCC's office, make an application that would work for both of us, and then just understand our roles in that whole thing. So just wanted to note that on there, because that has been, it's been confusing in the past. And if it's confusing for us, it's even more confusing for the public, which is not what we want. All right. Code violations. Again, just kind of calling back to when you guys were breezing through the office, code violations have just, they become a focal point for planning and zoning, because historically they have not been, and you know, our code has not been enforced. There's not been a lot of enforcement in the county in the past several years. So in an effort to help with that, and because there's been such an increase in the amount of code violations, we've been trying to tackle that over the last year, and it has been, just to be completely candid with you, an absolute nightmare. Mainly because we don't have enough staff to do it, because the start is, we can issue violations all day long, and we can send letters all day long and point out what people are doing wrong, but then the minute they come in and they need to start the process to compliance, that's when it gets really time consuming. And then that's where we are spending a ton of time, which translates to, very roughly, taxpayer dollars, working with these people to get them compliant, which is awesome, it's beneficial, but sometimes it is very disheartening to spend months and months and months on code violations and have no way. So we're always trying to refine that process, and we're always trying to see what we can do better and make it easier. So starting from the top, very basic. This has always been very confusing, but I think we finally have it dialed in. So I kind of messed this up. So it says complaints versus blight. So complaints, we have basically like zoning violations versus blight. And this is the way that we've understood it from the prosecutor's office. So you've got blight, which is enforced by a different ordinance, and then you've got zoning violations, which is enforced by our office. So we had 2 different complaint forms, because that's the first thing that we do when someone has a complaint. A, because it helps us track that complaint. B, because it just makes everything, it's just so much clearer. So when someone comes in, they have a complaint, in the ordinance, in the nuisance ordinance, I believe, they can submit that complaint to a number of different offices, from the BOCC to planning and zoning to even public works, can take in that complaint. Once we get that complaint, it's our understanding, my understanding, that whatever office analyzes that complaint for whatever the matter is. So it works, the form works, but what was happening is P&Z was getting all of these complaints and being expected to deal with them, although a lot of them were nuisance complaints. And so we tried really hard, and I think have come to somewhat of a clear process of filtering these out. They're either gonna come to us and we're gonna review it for zoning. If there are any zoning violations, we're going to address those. If there are no zoning violations, we're basically gonna send that up to the prosecutor's office and let them decide who's gonna deal with that complaint, typically the sheriff's office. If it happens to be, excuse me, related to zoning, so for example, gosh, that's a bad was gonna say junk cars and wrecking yards are also very great. They're tied into the Board of County Commissioners as far as the licensing goes, but then when it gets, it's very, very confusing. So I'll use a different example. For example, let's say zoning, you have somebody operating a boot factory in a zone that doesn't typically allow for that. So what we'll do is we'll essentially say, ask whoever to fill out, the complainant to fill out the form. It's all anonymous, we don't share that information. We'll look at zoning, we'll see if we have any permits on record, see if we have any conditional use permits, if zoning even allows for that. If not, then we'll go out, we do ask that people provide photos if that's safe for them, if they can, and if not, then we have to go investigate either way. That's what the prosecutors asked us to do, just in case we have to go on record of saying what we saw and when. So we typically get this complaint, we go out and perform a site visit and take some photos ourselves, and then come back and basically issue a violation from our office. Sometimes it will be a warning to say, hey, you could potentially be in violation here. If it's unclear for us, if we can't determine exactly, like if there is a violation, we're kind of learning that we don't want to issue that violation without getting more information. So, we might say, hey, this is a warning, you might be in violation of zoning code, can you give us a call? Other times, if it's a blatant violation, we'll send them a notice. That goes out certified mail. Most of the time, they'll respond and they'll say, how do I get compliant? And then this is where it gets very, very time consuming. And again, this is sort of how we've dealt with things in the past. Historically, there's always room for improvement. But in the past, we said, hey, you need a conditional use permit for that. You need to apply for that. So then what are we doing? In the past, full disclosure, we have let those violations exist while we processed the conditional use permit. Since I have taken on the role, that is no longer the objective. The objective is the violation needs to stop. If it does not stop, we're going to forward that violation to the prosecutor's office, who will then send a letter. And like I said, they might get a letter from zoning and be like, hey, what can I do to fix it? If it comes to the prosecutor's office, things get a little bit more serious. So what we're trying to do is stop that violation, say you need to come in and get a conditional use permit. And then rather than, it's mainly an opportunity for them to show us that they're serious about whatever they're doing, and if not, then it needs to cease. So that's sort of our process. That's our process for code violations. We try to handle them in the office. If that doesn't work, they get sent up to the prosecutors. However, if it's a severe violation, for example, we have somebody who is constructing a large structure in the floodway without any type of documentation or anything that we need, and that's like a huge no-no. Like, we can't construct anything in the floodway without taking really large measures to do that and giving us what we need. They were not responsive to any of the violation letters we sent. They kept telling us that they were working on it, and then we sent them up to the that one was just like, hey, we just need you to step in and help us out. Prosecutor's office has been great. Brittany's like our liaison for that. So we get a complaint, we investigate it, because we're Shoshone County, and I believe in, and anybody can correct me on this, but I believe that we're always going to try to get them compliant first, unless again it is a very severe violation. Like, our job is to try to get them into compliance and to see if we can help them fit into the box of the rules. Now, if that doesn't happen, or if we're just having issues with that, or we feel like we're being misled into thinking that they want to be compliant, but they're really just biding time, there are other steps that we can take. I think that covers the process mainly. Some of the bigger violations, I wouldn't say bigger, but some problematic violations. The North Fork, the floodplain area of the North Fork. Floodway, and I won't nerd out on you and explain the whole floodplain designation. However, we do have a lot of development in the floodplain and the floodway that is not permitted. And I'll get to the big kind of like cherry on top of the cake here in a second why this is important, but we also have matters that have come up is RV use, so people residing in recreational vehicles. Floodplain on there again, in case you can't tell how serious I am about floodplain. It's gonna be everywhere.
Popped up.
Yeah, so it's on, it's on the brain, it's very important. Anyways, all of this change in use, so we have a lot of people using those hickory sheds to where they're not up to residential code. All of this is, again, because our code is so open to interpretation. it makes it really hard for us to enforce rules that we don't have, or rules that are really unclear. And if they're unclear to us and we have a hard time figuring them out, the public is gonna really struggle with that, and that's why we have a lot of these issues. So moving on, to tie this all in, moving on to HMH. So HMH, we have a contract with them. I can find a copy of that contract. I believe.
I'm sure I have it in the
Maybe
agreement
somewhere, and we can find it. I don't know how. So we have a contract. It kind of lists, you know, what we do in there. I believe that Public Works has a contract with them as well, and that needs to be touched up a little bit. So I don't know if it would be worth revisiting our contract as well. Again, just to repeat, they are, we use them for floodplain management, we use them for professional services. So if we need some help with something, we'll ask them, but more often than not, we're gonna try to handle it in-house. If there are larger projects that we need them to help with, so things that are gonna be expensive and a little bit more involved, or they're hands-on, we definitely need professional services in terms of like surveyors, or well, not necessarily surveyors, but engineers. They will put together a task order for us, and I brought an example, I only have one copy, but basically what they'll do is we'll say, hey, you know, for example, this one was for some no-rise certifications, which deals with floodway development along stream banks, but they'd be doing it for the county, so they would be doing it for us, not for applicants. We don't like them to do no-rise or anything for the applicants. If we can help it, we're gonna have the applicants provide their own data. So they basically break down the price, and if it's gonna be a kind of a larger dollar amount, we have this sort of more or less verbal agreement with the last commissioners to say, hey, if it's gonna be a larger bill, we're gonna come to you, we're gonna make sure that that's okay. We're gonna look at the budget first, and we're gonna come to you and see if that's what you want us to do with this task order. So a couple of these task orders include, there was some FEMA compliance that was sort of left over from the last floodplain manager that they're dealing with. Recreational overlay districts, so this was something to do with, and I would have to go, it's been a long time since we've talked about it, looking into establishing basically an overlay district, which would be sort of like an additional layer on top of zoning. So you've got Bunker Hill, we've got floodplain, which says, hey, you have zoning rules, but then you also have additional rules because you're in a sensitive area. So this had something to do with creating an overlay district along a portion of the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene River to collect fees from, because we don't have any recreational zoning. I should clear that up. There's no distinct recreational zoning. You can recreate in a lot of our zones. We don't have any recreational zoning. So this overlay district would kind of create an opportunity, I believe, the way I understand it, to collect fees based off of recreational use somehow. A number of I don't know, there was the commissioners had an idea, but they mainly wanted us to establish like this area where we could do that, and then let them and legal and whomever try to figure out what rules would apply there. So that was something. The zoning code revisions, I mean, just going over this entire list, we had started, we being, when Dan Martinson was here and myself and the Planning and Zoning Commission had a lot of talks about revising our zoning code to make it, number one, easier to understand and interpret. Number two, more consistent. Number three would be easier to enforce. The list goes on and on. We have not asked HMH to come up with task orders for the overlay districts. I'd have to go back and see. We may have asked them to come up with a task order for the recreational overlay district. Zoning code revisions, I can't remember if we asked or not. Our comprehensive plan, which is essentially the groundwork for our zoning code, is severely outdated. I mentioned in passing that it could potentially be non-compliant with Idaho code. So that is something that we've asked HMH to address right away, because we don't want to be non-compliant with Idaho code. So they're going to be looking at that. And then the Mountain Overlay District, which was just adopted by the city of Wallace. That's a big one coming up. You may have heard about that. So in short, to kind of bring you up to speed on that, Wallace just adopted theirs. And so it's my understanding that that applies to the city limits of Wallace. The process for that Mountain Overlay District kind of started with the county. In that a group of people came to the commissioners, I would say back in 2020, to get them to revise the comprehensive plan to make it a little bit, to require a little bit more when developing in what they call the view shed. So started with us, essentially the county, I'm just casually kind of describing this, but the county said, well, if Wallace wants to adopt Mountain Overlay District, we'll kind of pick it up from there. So Wallace has adopted it now. We have a draft ordinance for the Mountain Overlay District that I can definitely provide to you. But that will go through, that will start with Planning and Zoning Commission, which I believe they're gonna review at the February meeting. And then we'll take it from there as far as looking through code and determining what we need to do to advertise that and what the steps would be. You know, it would be something, again, like a recommendation from Planning and Zoning Commission, workshopping it, bringing it to the commissioners and so on. So that would be the next thing that's on deck. We do have a copy that was, I believe, created by HMH for the city of Wallace and then adjusted to fit the county, drafted up to fit the county. So, fee structure, I know the prosecutor's office was working on kind of cleaning up our schedule of fees. There are a couple that we would like to add to that, so that was just wanted to throw that on there. That's kind of been floating out and about. We can definitely review that anytime. Under HMH, all of this stuff falls under HMH, so we're becoming, it was a little bit unclear because this is something that we're all getting used to. So if there are fees associated with an application that is outside of what the county is using HMH for in terms of consulting, the applicants will be responsible for those fees. So for example, if somebody comes in and they give us a floodplain development permit, we would have to look at that and say, well, we are using HMH for floodplain managers. So in theory, the county should be covering those fees because we're using them as consultants. However, if we're doing something, say, with subdivisions, and I'll use subdivisions because we get reimbursed for professional services by Rob Stratton reviewing plats, we will invoice the applicant for those fees so that we get reimbursed. So similarly, if there are fees related to an application that the county maybe isn't responsible for covering, we'll try to get those reimbursed. And so what we need to do and have been doing in this process is being very clear and upfront with people, saying, hey, there might be some fees associated with this application based on the review process. Those fees will likely be invoiced to you. So we're working on updating that on our applications, but right now, just speaking up and being very transparent with anybody applying for those, that, hey, you know, if you want to talk to our consultants on this, or if you want to just hear what they have to say, you will be responsible for those fees, and just providing them that backup documentation saying, hey, this was related to your application. Excuse me, moving on, Planning and Zoning Commission, I'll bring you up to speed on their scheduled meetings. They get the same time every month. Typically, if we don't have, I think the Idaho code requires you have so many meetings, but if we don't have anything to discuss, we typically don't have one, as long as we're being compliant there. I'll also get you a list of members. They're all members of the public. There are 6 of them. I believe we just filled the 6th seat very recently. And then I do believe that one gentleman who has been on the commission, I think this is like, no kidding, I think it's like his 30-year, yeah, his 30-year anniversary is like this year. So there may be an open seat. Just a note, they typically, not always, but more often than not, they're just making recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners as far as applications go. Larger projects would be the MOD, the Mountain Overlay District, kind of covered that. The FEMA audit, I'll save that for very, very last. The recreational over district is on there, and then the comp plan is on there. So the FEMA audit is new. I just got a call or an email from Susie Sarpong, who is the regional manager for our area, and she is asking us to compile a bunch of data for her by this Thursday, so she can prepare to visit us on the week of the 23rd.
You just got that like a week ago.
Yeah. Yeah. So super stoked on that. It's a pretty big deal, and I think it is going to be beneficial, obviously, for the county, and anything where we have to adhere to FEMA. I know nobody really enjoys it. However, I think it is going to be eye-opening for a lot of the landowners, especially in those areas along the river. So what we're doing is, just to break it down for you, I'm working on compiling the records. Susie has asked that they be organized in geological order, so HMH will be helping me do that, and HMH will be assisting in basically doing a lot of the mapping and things like that where it's a little outside or above my pay grade. We were hoping, I tried to call Susie and tell her that there was maybe a little bit too much snow for a visit, but she said, hey, let's plan for me being on there the 23rd, and if not, then at least I'll have the information. So that is what I've been doing for about the past week, just to kind of really hone in on what we're doing. That's kind of where my attention's been. It hasn't been too brutal yet, just about done. So we plan on getting her that information Thursday, but where maybe the board would come in is, Susie said, you know, Justin will be there. Justin, our floodplain manager, will tag along in the, basically her site visits. I said that I would probably hang back, being that I'm the only planning staff. I'd rather just leave the planning office open if she didn't need me. She did say that she called it the CEO, but I think she means chairman. So I don't know if there is a commissioner available to tag along in this visit. I don't know if it's absolutely crucial, but just to kind of keep that open the week of the 23rd. I don't have exact dates, but as it gets closer, she could potentially cancel too. So that's a big one for us, because what happens, and it's, I can show you this huge file to where we had to do, I was not involved in it, but I watched it kind of standing off to the side. They basically come in, is my understanding, and they find whatever violations, and then I believe that we as a county are responsible for enforcing those. So, just a little bit of heads up that that's coming down. That's probably the most pressing thing, is just getting ready for that. But I think more than anything, it's just going to be a commissioner tagging along with our floodplain manager and Susie.
What kind of extra costs are attached to the county for all that?
I don't know. I would have to look into that. I would say, the first thing that comes to mind is HMH is going to bill us for having the floodplain manager there. So whatever Justin's hourly fee is, we're going to get billed for that. I don't know how long the visits are, how many days, or anything like that, but that, right off the top, I would know for sure. Other than that, I'm not aware of any fees that would be associated with it, other than, of course, the time and effort you're putting into bringing those into compliance, which is
the expensive part.
Because you're also looking at HMH helping with those, just from the point of view that we can see from where we're at. With that, if you have any questions or anything specific that you are aware of or that I didn't cover that I can kind of get more into, please let me know. But
well, you did mention multiple times that we really need to update our code. So by we, really, what could that process look like, to update our code?
That's a great question. So we have a lot of the legwork done to where we were, basically Dan and I, when Dan Martinson was here, and then the P&Z Commission had kind of like gone through and just really gone over the code with a fine-tooth comb and picked out all the problems. That would look like, I think, basically sending a task order or asking HMH to put a task order together for us. And their relationship with us is always, if we in-house would like to do a lot of the legwork and get a lot of that done, we can keep them out of it as much as we're comfortable with. So we could potentially, it would be staff, it would be P&Z Commission. There's of course some community involvement in that, like in a broader sense. I've never had to do it before, so they would have to kind of guide us. I know that they've done it for others, so it might even be just starting with HMH and saying, hey, where do we start? And they would give us a couple bullet points in determining. They would maybe ask us what we would like to see in our zoning code, or kind of some objectives, and we could say, anytime we used to have this phrase down in planning and zoning, and try not to use it anymore because it got kind of stale. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. So a lot of times we look at other counties, we're a very, very unique county, and we keep that in mind. Like, you can't just copy paste something from another, which if you read through our code, we have done, and it's not suitable for us. And it's very, it doesn't make any sense. So we Frankenstein this code based upon other counties that aren't us and aren't us right now in 2023. And so what we would possibly do is look to other counties that are similar and maybe having the same struggles, and then try to, in some sense, take that and make it suitable for us. That's a great way to start. And then that way we're taking something that's already been done, customizing it, and then having it reviewed or saying, hey, could this potentially work? And then looking to our consultants to see, mainly, the main point would be that it's compliant with our comprehensive plan, because we really can't change the zoning code until we change the comp plan, and then also making sure it complies with Idaho code.
Sounds like it might be worth looking at.
I agree.
Yep, I agree.
Cool.
Okay.
And I'll look through my email and see what correspondence I've had with HMH about that. I don't know if they sent me a task order, if they were working on that, but I'll follow up with them and let you know.
You know, is the commission, the planning zoning commission, are they doing the comp plan now, or anybody even done anything with it?
Not yet. The furthest we've got is I think that was brought up. I think that someone from the P&Z commission reached out to the board and said, hey, this is important. Would the board support us in using, essentially using those professional services to fix this? And the board was like, yes, we're absolutely support that because we need to bring it up. So I think that the code revisions and that recreational overlay district were three things that I brought up to HMH to put together in a task order. So yes, I've started with HMH just because they have done this before and they can tell us where to go, but as far as revising the comp plan, we haven't even begun yet.
They also did Benoit City.
Yes, yeah, exactly, yeah, they just did that really recently. And they didn't do it for City of Kellogg, but City of Kellogg just updated their comprehensive plan as well. So it's kind of going around like it's a pretty common thing, but that is, I would say, one of the pros of HMH is that they do work with other smaller counties and have done a lot of this and can take that template and just make it fit us.
How many years have we used HMH?
This is our first year, I mean, not even a year yet.
Okay.
Yeah, very, very new. It's a very, very new thing. And that's why I don't have direct answers for you for some of this because it's, we haven't used them for that yet.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they're out of Coeur d'Alene?
Coeur d'Alene, I think they have an office here that they hardly ever use.
Okay.
I think they're like all over the place. I don't even know how many employees they have.
And try to get a meeting with you guys and them so that way you can meet them, I suppose. That would be
Absolutely.
helpful.
Absolutely.
And you said you have a contract with
Yeah.
HMH?
Yeah, I can find a copy, Jasmine and I can find a copy of that for
Okay.
you. Yeah,
That'd be great.
absolutely.
Any other questions, Mr. Zimmerman?
Well, I think that's it. We got a lot of,
I just felt like the faucet just started.
I
It's
know.
like Rain Man.
We've got 3 different things today.
She was like that on the tour too.
Wow.
It just.
She was a very quiet, small child. Shy. Well, how about comments or questions from the public? Do we have any comments or questions from anybody in the audience today?
No, I'm pretty good. I have a lot of questions that I would like to visit with you personally about at some point in regard to the River District, as you
Mhm.
can imagine. And there's a lot that you've, put out there to, really process, that I need to process. And then for all of you, I'll have questions and say, okay, because if we're going to do a, recreational vehicle district, basically, an RD district type of mapping and planning, I would like to see what that's gonna look like. I think that's gonna be a real important aspect of growth in
We
the
like
county.
to have those RVs in the floodplain because you can gauge the water speed by how quickly they move.
I know. You gotta measure, well, some of them are ready for competition this year. That's right.
Any questions for anybody else?
Yes. Does anybody have any idea what we've spent with HMH so far this year?
I can get you copies of the invoices if you want.
I can get it off your budget. worksheet.
Okay, yeah, that's all I have,
Okay, 'cause I believe that we only, I think it's $25,000 to $30,000.
I wanna say, for how much we have to spend, like what our budget item
What
is.
your
Yeah,
budget
I
is.
think I believe it was around 27,000.
Yeah, I know they changed it twice.
Yeah.
So,
And then as far as how much of that we've used, I don't know off the top of my head.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Tammy, anything?
No.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
Monica, thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for your time.
Quirky little update.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
anytime.
I gotta go rest my ears.
I'm gonna